Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, you're joining us as we explore truly immense scales, both of time and the very ground beneath us.
That's right.
We're going to unpack the eons of Earth's history and the surprisingly dynamic nature of our planet's surface.
Yeah, we're taking a close look at geologic time, those vast, vast stretches that really put human history into perspective. And then there's the revolutionary theory of plate tectonics.
Which explains how our seemingly solid Earth is actually, well, a constantly moving jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. A very slow-moving one, mind you.
True. So to help us navigate this, we've gathered some fascinating material. We'll be pulling insights from the Plate Tectonics Geosciences Lubertext, exploring a brief history of geologic time, and Lecture 6, Geologic Time, from YouTube.
And getting into the details with the plate tectonics revolution, what are rocks and how do they form?
Yeah.
And methods of dating the Earth, Part 2, absolute dating, mainly radiometric dating, from Crash Course and Professor Dave Explains.
Our goal, really, is to understand how scientists measure these mind-boggling timescales and how the movement of Earth's outer layers has shaped the world we know.
Okay, let's dive in.
All right, starting with the almost unimaginable scope of geologic time.
It's a real challenge for us, isn't it? With our relatively brief lives, to truly grasp the billions of years that make up Earth's history.
Absolutely. Our brains just aren't naturally wired for it. I mean, we struggle to picture even a few centuries, let alone millions or billions of years.
Yeah, but luckily, as one of our video sources points out, scientists figured out they could turn to the rocks themselves.
Like a kind of physical diary.
Precisely. A record of Earth's unfolding story written in stone.
And by examining these rocky records, early geologists like Steno, Arduino, and William Smith started piecing things together.
They did. Their work was foundational, really laying the groundwork for what we now call the geologic timescale, or GTS.
Okay, the GTS. It's like a hierarchy, isn't it?
Yep.
Organizing time from the broadest categories of eons down into finer divisions.
Right. Eons, then eras, periods, epochs, and finally ages. It's like zooming in.
So you can ask different kinds of questions depending on the scale you're looking at. Big picture stuff at the eon level, more specific details maybe at the epoch level.
Exactly. The larger units, eons and eras, let us tackle those fundamental questions. Was there life? What kind? Where? The grand sweep.
And then zooming in with periods and epochs lets you investigate, say, the climate during a specific few million years, or how certain organisms adapted.
Precisely. So let's take that wide view first. Let's journey through the eons, beginning with, well, a pretty dramatic one, the Hadean.
The Hadean. Sounds ominous.
It does. It goes from Earth's formation about 4.6 billion years ago, up to 4 billion years ago. Its name comes from Hades, the Greek underworld.
And for good reason, I gather.
Oh, yeah. This is a truly hellish period, as the name suggests.
Our brief history video really painted a picture. Constant impacts, molten rock surface. It mentioned the Hadean is the only eon with no fossils found.
Not at all. The early Earth was just incredibly intense. Bombardment from space, widespread volcanism, a completely different atmosphere, definitely not hospitable for life as we know it.
But something crucial happened towards the end, right? Cooling.
Yes. Despite the chaos, the Earth's crust began to cool and solidify, a fundamental step, which eventually led to the formation of the first continents.
Which brings us to the next eon.
The Archean, lasting from 4 billion to 2.5 billion years ago. Archean means origin in Greek.
Was this when life actually began?
Well, it was initially thought so. The exact origin point is still debated, but life certainly began to flourish during the Archean. Mostly anaerobic life, though.
Meaning it didn't need oxygen.
Correct. And we also see the formation of early continents and the first oceans during this time. The planet was starting to take shape, but still very different, especially the atmosphere, hardly any free oxygen.
Okay, so Hadean, Archean. Next up is the Proterozoic.
That's the one. A huge stretch of time from 2.5 billion all the way to 541 million years ago.
A lot must have happened then.
Oh, absolutely. Our sources highlight the development of plate tectonics starting in this era.
Yeah.
A massive step towards the modern Earth system.
And something about oxygen?
Yes, the rise of oxygen in the atmosphere. This was huge. Early life forms called cyanobacteria started producing oxygen through photosynthesis.
The great oxidation event.
That's it. Revolutionary, but probably also triggered a mass extinction for a lot of the older anaerobic life that couldn't handle oxygen.
Double-edged sword, then. But it paved the way for new life forms.
It did, including the ancestral eukaryotes, cells with a nucleus, the basis for more complex life. And towards the end of the Proterozoic, we see the first really large, complex organisms appearing in the fossil record. Things like Charnia, Dickinsonia. Quite strange looking, some of them.
Setting the stage for the next big chapter.
Exactly. The current eon, the Phanerozoic, which began 531 million years ago.
Phanerozoic meaning visible life.
Right. Because this is when life really exploded in diversity and, crucially, developed hard parts, shells, skeletons that fossilize much more easily. This is the eon of trees, dinosaurs, mammals, us, life as we generally picture it.
And we break this eon down further into eras, starting with the Paleozoic.
Correct. The Paleozoic era. It kicks off with something quite remarkable, often called the Cambrian explosion.
An explosion of life?
In geological terms, yes. Over a relatively short span, maybe 25 million years, the fossil record just bursts, with complex animals having mineralized bits, shells, exoskeletons. Trilobites are the famous example from this early period.
Ah, trilobites. I've seen those fossils. They're everywhere from that time, aren't they?
They were incredibly common and widespread, which makes them excellent index fossils for the Paleozoic.
Index fossils. Those are the ones that help date the rock layers because they were common but only existed for a specific time period.
Exactly, like time markers embedded in the rock. If you find a certain type of trilobite, you know you're looking at rocks from a particular part of the Paleozoic.
Got it. So, besides trilobites, what else was happening in the Paleozoic seas and eventually on land?
Well, fish developed jaws and teeth, becoming dominant predators. We see the first sharks and those bizarre armored fish called placoderms.
Armored fish?
Meanwhile, land, which had been pretty barren, started getting colonized. First by plants, then arthropods, insects, spiders, that sort of thing.
So ecosystems started developing on land.
Yes, by about 370 million years ago. And not long after that, the first amphibians evolved, taking those first steps out of the water.
And the Paleozoic ended with Pangaea?
Yes, the continents gradually came together, culminating in the formation of the supercontinent Pangaea around 299 million years ago.
Pangaea. Okay, what happened next in the Mesozoic era?
The Mesozoic, often called the Age of Reptiles. And for good reason.
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs, yes, but also pterosaurs flying overhead and various marine reptiles ruling the seas. Reptiles were incredibly successful. In fact, all the non-avian dinosaurs lived only during the Mesozoic.
Making them great index fossils for that era too, I suppose.
Absolutely. Find a T-Rex bone, you know you're in the Mesozoic.
But it wasn't just reptiles, right? Other familiar groups started appearing.
Correct. The very first mammals evolved during the Mesozoic, alongside frogs, bees, even flowering plants. They were there, just often overshadowed by the giant reptiles.
Until the end of the Mesozoic, that is, the KPG extinction event.
Exactly. About 66 million years ago, a really dramatic end to the era. The evidence strongly points to a massive asteroid impact.
Right. The iridium layer found worldwide in rocks of that age.
Yeah.
And the Chicxulub crater.
Compelling evidence. It caused widespread devastation, wiping out all the non-avian dinosaurs and many other species.
A major reset button for life on Earth.
It really was. But while the giant reptiles perished, smaller animals, including birds, which are dinosaurs, technically the surviving lineage and our mammal ancestors, managed to pull through.
Ushering in the Cenozoic era, our era.
That's right. The Cenozoic is characterized by the diversification of mammals. They basically moved into all the ecological niches left vacant by the big dinosaurs.
And eventually the rise of humans.
Yes. And as the PBS Eons video points out, our species has had a profound impact, hasn't it? Altering habitats, impacting other organisms, changing the biosphere.
It's a bit sobering. The video even suggests our cities, our farms, maybe even our fossilized bones could become the index fossils for future geologists.
It's a fascinating, slightly unsettling thought. Our fleeting moment in the grand scheme, which actually leads us nicely into how we know all these dates. How do we put numbers on this vast timeline?
Yeah, that's the key question, isn't it? We have this incredible story laid out in the rocks, these eons and eras. But how do scientists actually figure out the when? How do they date things?
Right. Well, there are two main ways: relative dating and numerical or absolute dating.
Relative dating sounds like what we touched on earlier, figuring out the sequence, what's older or younger, without necessarily knowing the exact age and years.
Precisely. It's based on some fundamental principles.
Yeah.
We mentioned superposition, oldest layers at the bottom, youngest at the top, assuming they haven't been overturned.
Makes sense. Like stacking newspapers.
Kind of, yeah. Then there's original horizontality. Sediments usually settle out of water or air in flat horizontal layers. So if you see tilted or folded rocks.
That tilting or folding must have happened after they were deposited.
Exactly. And lateral continuity layers tend to spread out horizontally until they thin out or hit the edge of whatever basin they're forming in.
Okay, so superposition, horizontality, continuity. What else?
Cross-cutting relationships are crucial. If a geological feature, like a fault line or a body of magma that cooled into igneous rock, cuts across existing rock layers,
Then the feature doing the cutting must be younger than the layers it cuts through.
you got it. And inclusions work the other way. If you
Mm.
find fragments of one type of rock embedded inside another,
The fragments must be older than the rocks surrounding them.
perfect. And one more the lecture video mentioned. Baked contacts or bake zones.
Ah, this is when magma intrudes into older rock.
Yes. The heat from the intrusion bakes or metamorphoses the surrounding rock it touches. That baked rock had to be there before the intrusion, so it's older. It helps tell sills from lava flows, too.
How so?
A sill intrudes between layers, so it bakes the rock above and below it. A lava flow only flows on top of existing rocks, so it only bakes what's underneath.
Clever. So using all these principles, geologists could piece together the sequence of events long before they could assign actual dates.
Absolutely. They developed a relative geologic timescale based purely on observation and these logical rules. They also recognized unconformities.
Those are the gaps, right? Missing time in the rock record.
Exactly. Gaps representing periods where either no sediment was deposited or where existing rock was eroded away before new layers formed on top. Hutton's interpretation of these as representing vast cycles of uplift, erosion, and deposition was a huge conceptual leap.
And there are different kinds, like angular unconformities, where tilted layers meet horizontal ones.
Right, showing a whole sequence of deposition, tilting, erosion, and then new deposition. There are also disconformities, nonconformities. They all represent missing time, missing chapters.
So relative dating gives the order, the what happened before what, but how did we get the numbers? The millions and billions of years.
That required numerical or absolute dating. And the early attempts were, well, interesting, but ultimately flawed.
Like Lord Kelvin trying to calculate Earth's age based on how long it would take to cool down?
Yes, a brilliant calculation based on the physics known at the time, but he didn't know about radioactivity. The heat generated by radioactive decay inside the Earth throws off that cooling calculation completely, making the Earth seem much younger than it is.
And trying to date things by sedimentation rates.
Also problematic. Deposition rates vary wildly, layers get compacted, and you never know how much has been eroded away. John Joly tried using ocean salinity, assuming salts accumulated at a constant rate, another clever idea, but incorrect. Though he did flag the importance of radioactive elements.
So the real breakthrough was?
Radiometric dating. This completely revolutionized geology. As Professor Dave explains, it relies on the natural, predictable decay of radioactive isotopes.
Okay, isotopes, atoms of the same element but with different numbers of neutrons, and some are unstable.
Exactly. These unstable parent isotopes spontaneously decay, transforming into stable daughter isotopes over time. And crucially, they do this at a constant measurable rate.
The half-life.
Half-life. The time it takes for half of the parent isotopes in a sample to decay into daughter isotopes.
And different isotopes have different half-lives.
Vastly different. Uranium-238 takes 4.5 billion years for half of it to decay into lead-206. Carbon-14's half-life is only 5,730 years.
So you use different isotope pairs depending on how old you think the sample might be. Long half-lives for ancient rocks, short ones for more recent organic materials.
Precisely. Uranium, lead, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium are great for dating very old rocks, often billions of years. Carbon-14 is used for things like archaeological artifacts, bones, wood, up to maybe 50,000 or 75,000 years old.
And you need specific minerals for this to work well, right? Like zircon.
Yes, certain minerals incorporate these radioactive elements when they crystallize from magma or during metamorphism. Zircon is fantastic because it readily incorporates uranium, but rejects lead when it forms. And importantly, it has a very high closure temperature.
Closure temperature, what's that?
It's the temperature below which the mineral crystal becomes a closed system for that parent-daughter isotope pair. Once it cools below that point, the daughter isotopes produced by decay are trapped inside the crystal.
Ah, so if the rock gets reheated above the closure temperature later on?
The daughter isotopes can escape, diffuse out of the crystal, and that effectively resets the radiometric clock, making the rock appear younger than it really is. Zircon's high closure temperature makes it less susceptible to this resetting.
Okay, that makes sense. But why is it hard to directly date sedimentary rocks this way?
Because sedimentary rocks are made of fragments, grains derived from older rocks. If you date a zircon grain in a sandstone, you're dating when that zircon crystal originally formed in its parent igneous or metamorphic rock, not when the sandstone itself is deposited.
So you date the source, not the final rock. Right.
Wait, though you can sometimes bracket the age of sedimentary layers by dating igneous intrusions or volcanic ash layers above and below them. And methods like isochron dating are clever ways around some issues, like not knowing the initial daughter isotope amount.
And how do they actually measure these tiny amounts of isotopes?
Using a very sensitive machine called a mass spectrometer, it can separate atoms by their mass and measure the precise ratios of parent-to-daughter isotopes.
Okay, so radiometric dating is the main tool for absolute ages. Any other methods?
Fission track dating is another one mentioned in the lecture. When uranium decays, the particles emitted can damage the crystal lattice, leaving tiny tracks.
Like little scars.
Kind of. You can etch the mineral surface and count these tracks under a microscope. The number of tracks relates to the age and the uranium content. It works well for minerals like apatite and zircon.
Interesting. And carbon-14 dating, you mentioned that's for organic stuff.
Yes, carbon-14 is created in the upper atmosphere by cosmic rays interacting with nitrogen. It becomes part of carbon dioxide, which plants absorb, and then animals eat the plants.
So all living things incorporate a tiny amount of radioactive carbon-14.
Right. But when an organism dies, it stops taking in new carbon-14. And the C14 already in its tissues starts to decay away with that 5,730-year half-life. By measuring how much is left compared to the stable carbon isotopes, you can figure out how long ago it died.
Up to about 50,000 years or so?
Roughly, yeah. After about 10 half-lives, there's usually too little C14 left to measure accurately. And it's not useful for rocks, obviously, and things like nuclear weapons testing have complicated the atmospheric C14 levels in recent times.
Wow. Okay, so these dating methods, especially radiometric dating, are how we put the numbers on the geologic timescale. It gives us this incredible, detailed history.
Absolutely. It anchors that relative sequence in actual time, billions of years of it.
Now, to understand what drives a lot of the action in that timeline, the continents moving, mountains rising, oceans opening and closing, we need to talk about plate tectonics.
Yes, the grand unifying theory of geology, really. As the Crash Course Geography video puts it, it was truly transformative. It explains, well, almost everything about the Earth's large-scale structure and behavior.
Continents, oceans, mountains, volcanoes, earthquakes, it all ties back to this.
Pretty much. It's hard to overstate its importance. But like you said earlier, it wasn't just one person's sudden idea. It built up over decades.
The core idea being that the Earth's outer rigid layer, the lithosphere,
Which is the crust plus the very top rigid part of the mantle.
is broken into pieces, these tectonic plates.
Exactly. And these plates are moving around, floating on a hotter, softer layer beneath called the asthenosphere.
It started, in a way, with Alfred Wegener back in the early 20th century. His idea of continental drift.
He was a key precursor, definitely. He gathered a lot of compelling evidence, the jigsaw fit of continents like South America and Africa, matching fossils and rock types found across oceans. He proposed they were once joined in a supercontinent, Pangaea.
But the big problem was,
He couldn't explain how. How could these enormous continents possibly plow through the solid ocean floor? The mechanism was missing, and most scientists at the time dismissed his idea.
so the theory stalled until new evidence came along.
Right, particularly after World War II, when technology allowed for extensive mapping of the ocean floor. That's when Heezen and Tharp produced those incredible physiographic maps.
Revealing the mid-Atlantic ridge, that huge underwater mountain range.
Exactly, and also discovering deep ocean trenches. This led Harry Hess, building on earlier ideas, to propose seafloor spreading.
The idea that new ocean crust is actually being formed at these ridges.
Yes. Magma rises from the mantle at the mid-ocean ridges, cools to form new basaltic crust, and this new crust pushes the older seafloor away from the ridge on both sides, like a giant conveyor belt.
But if new crust is always being made, why isn't the Earth getting bigger?
Ah, the crucial question. Hess proposed that the older oceanic crust eventually gets destroyed, recycled back into the mantle at the deep ocean trenches. This process is called subduction.
Okay, so creation at ridges, destruction at trenches. What confirmed this?
Paleomagnetism was key. Scientists discovered that rocks record the direction of Earth's magnetic field at the time they form, and Earth's magnetic field flips periodically.
North becomes south, south becomes north.
Right, so as new seafloor forms at the ridges and cools, the iron-bearing minerals align with the current magnetic field. As the field flips over time, you get stripes of rock with normal polarity alternating with stripes of reverse polarity.
And they found these magnetic stripes on the seafloor.
Yes. And crucially, the pattern was symmetrical on both sides of the mid-ocean ridges. The Vine-Matthews hypothesis explained this pattern as direct evidence of seafloor spreading the stripes were like a magnetic tape recording of the process.
Wow, that sounds a pretty solid proof.
It was huge. Plus, the discovery of deep earthquakes concentrated along the ocean trenches fit perfectly with the idea of a slab of dense oceanic crust being forced down, subducting, into the mantle.
So all these different lines of evidence, the shape of the seafloor, the magnetic stripes, the earthquake patterns, all pointed to the same thing.
Exactly. It all converged. And then, with mathematical modeling and growing computing power, scientists could precisely model plate movements and how the continents fit together. The theory became undeniable.
Okay, so we have these moving plates. How do they interact at their edges, their boundaries?
There are three main types of plate boundaries: divergent, convergent, and transform.
Divergent is where they move apart, like the mid-Atlantic ridge.
Precisely. Mid-ocean ridges are the prime example. Magma wells up, creates new oceanic crust, and pushes the plates apart. This can also happen within continents, forming rift valleys like the East African Rift. New crust is formed here.
Okay, then convergent is where they come together.
Right. And what happens depends on the type of crust involved. If dense oceanic crust collides with less dense continental crust,
The oceanic plate goes under.
Yep.
Subduction.
yes, it dives beneath the continental plate, forming a deep trench offshore and often leading to volcanic mountain ranges on the continent, like the Andes, fueled by melting of the subducting plate. Earthquakes are common here too.
What if two continents collide?
Since both are relatively buoyant, neither wants to subduct easily. So they crumple, fold, and thicken, pushing up massive mountain ranges. The Himalayas are the classic example, formed by India colliding with Asia.
And the third type, transform.
Transform boundaries are where plates slide horizontally past each other. The San Andreas Fault in California is a famous example.
Lots of earthquakes there too, right?
Definitely. But crust isn't really created or destroyed here. It just slides side by side. So these are also called conservative boundaries, sometimes described as dextral or sinistral, depending on the relative direction of movement.
Got it. Divergent apart, convergent together, transform sideways.
That's the basics. And these boundaries are where most of the world's earthquakes and volcanic activity occur. Think of the Pacific Ring of Fire.
Ah, yeah, that zone around the Pacific Ocean with all the volcanoes and quakes.
It's basically tracing out the convergent and transform boundaries surrounding the Pacific Plate and other plates.
And this process isn't static, right? The LibreText source mentioned the Wilson cycle.
Right. It's the idea that supercontinents assemble, break apart, ocean basins open, then close again as continents collide once more. There's a grand cycle playing out over hundreds of millions of years, driven by these plate movements.
What about things like Hawaii? They're volcanic, but not near a plate boundary.
Good point. Those are hotspots. They're thought to be caused by stationary plumes of extra hot material rising from deep within the mantle. As the plate moves over the hotspot, it creates a chain of volcanoes, like the Hawaiian Islands. The hotspot stays put, the plate moves over it.
So the older islands in the chain show the direction the plate has been moving.
Exactly. They're like tracks left by the plate's motion over the stationary plume.
And continents themselves grow over time. The Crash Course video mentioned continental shields and accretion.
Yeah, continents often have an ancient core, a shield, made of very old igneous and metamorphic rocks. Then over time, smaller bits of trussed island arcs, oceanic plateaus, other continental fragments can collide with and get stuck onto the edge of the continent, making it bigger. It's called accretion.
So continents are kind of geological patchworks. And there's still open questions like why Earth has plate tectonics but Venus doesn't.
Oh, absolutely. How did the lithosphere initially break into plates? What keeps the whole system going? Why is Earth unique in this way, at least in our solar system? Lots still to investigate.
And there's even a link back to the evolution of life.
Potentially, yes. Some researchers suggest that major mountain-building events caused by continental collisions could have increased erosion, washing more nutrients into the oceans. These nutrient pulses might have fueled bursts of evolution, perhaps even contributing to events like the Cambrian explosion.
It all connects. The deep Earth processes influencing surface life over geologic time.
It's an incredibly interconnected system.
It really is astonishing thinking about the sheer immensity of geologic time revealed by things like radiometric dating, and then understanding that the ground we stand on isn't static at all, but this dynamic mosaic of shifting plates. That's a profound shift in perspective.
It absolutely is. Realizing that continents drift, oceans open and close, mountains rise and fall, and that we can actually date these events going back billions of years. It gives you a completely different appreciation for our planet and the incredibly long, complex history of life it supports.
Definitely an aha. moment, or maybe several.
For sure.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to ponder. Given this constant geological reshaping, this planetary dynamism driven by plate tectonics, and considering our own species' relatively short time on the scene, what future geological changes might humanity witness? Or perhaps what changes might we even unintentionally influence in the ongoing story of Earth?
A big question to think about.
Indeed. Thanks for exploring the deep dive with us.